Science's role in public health, in public life, is under assault, and few people know that better than Professor Michael Mann and Dr. Peter Hotez. Both are familiar to you. They are both leading experts in their fields. Mann studies the impacts of climate change. Hotez is a public health expert focusing on infectious diseases and vaccines. Yet, in today's politics versus science world, both of these men have been targeted by climate deniers and vaccine skeptics who are challenging their expertise. In the first chapter of their new book, Science Under Siege, they wrote, quote, "Every week, sometimes daily, we each receive online threats or harassing phone calls to our offices. On multiple occasions, we have faced actual physical confrontations and stalking. We are not alone, as many scientists working in the areas of biomedicine and climate science, especially in the United States, now encounter similar threats. You might assume that the aggressors are lone actors, cranks, and conspiracists in their basements, but in many cases, the attacks are government-sanctioned, organized at the highest levels of the U.S. Congress, with senators and members of the House of Representatives boasting of their efforts to intimidate prominent scientists," end quote. Now, all of this intimidation comes at a time when public reliance on the scientific consensus to address a whole host of issues is more important than ever. Mann and Hotez write, quote, "These crises are inextricably interwoven. Climate change, along with urbanization, poverty, human migration, and other social determinants, is driving pandemics with increasing frequency. Whether it's the health of our people or the health of our planet, we are on an unsustainable path," end quote. Right after a quick commercial break, both Professor Michael Mann and Dr. Peter Hotez join me. Joining me now are two extremely good friends of the show, two really nerdy guys, which I know our audience loves because we try and make a smart show. Michael Mann is a distinguished professor of earth and environmental science at the University of Pennsylvania. He's the co-founder of realclimate.org. Dr. Peter Hotez is the co-director at the Center for Vaccine Development at Texas Children's Hospital and dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. Together, they are the co-authors of Science Under Siege: How to Fight the 5 Most Powerful Forces That Threaten Our World. Gentlemen, thank you for being on with me. It's amazing to me because I have relied on both of you for so many years in some of the most important moments of our history. And after it, you know, like the comments are, well, that's really smart. Can I read their book or whatever? But someone invariably comes in with some very specific challenge to your authority, Michael, or trying to undermine you. If you, as a casual viewer, you might think it's personal. Somebody doesn't like Michael Mann, but it's not. And what you and Peter write about is that there's a fairly organized attack on people like you and Peter because you are scientists, because you are authorities on issues of science.
Yeah, that's right, Ali. It's great to be with you. That's sort of how this book came into being. I, of course, had been attacked for decades because of the iconic hockey stick curve that we published back in 1998 that demonstrated the profound nature of the warming of our planet. It was a threat to certain vested interests. I came under attack. And that was a couple decades ago, those attacks started. Well, it was only about 5 years ago that I saw Peter and Tony Fauci and other public health scientists subject to exactly the same sorts of attacks, many of the same individuals and players. And I realized that, this was something larger, more concerted. Peter and I became friends, and we realized we had a book to write about this.
Yeah, and I'm glad you have. Peter, I was going to say, we've known climate, and there have been lobbying efforts involved in this for a long time, but we've known that climate is that controversial. Vaccines have always had a little controversy around them, but it exploded into something very, very mainstream during COVID. There was always a small group of people who had issues with vaccines. What changed? When did this become a thing where you started to get threats?
Yeah, that's right, Ali. We saw and we have discussed, at least 200,000 Americans needlessly died because they refused COVID vaccines, and they were victims of what was not misinformation or infodemic, meaning it's not just random junk out there on the internet. It was organized, it was deliberate, it was politically motivated and financially motivated. 200,000 Americans lost their lives, and that was the difference, is that it got adopted by far-right elements due to this propaganda concept of health freedom, medical freedom. That actually had started before the pandemic. And then it was joined in by the health, wellness, and influencer industry that was making money on buying up whatever they could as low-cost generics. If you ever wondered why they're anti-parasitic drugs like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, it's because you could buy them in bulk, they're cheap, and you can jack up the price and sell it with telehealth visits. But it also meant targeting the science and the scientists as public enemies or cartoon villains in order to peddle their snake oil.
Michael, talk to me about these. Right, these days it's climate, and a lot of the work against you is funded not just by government interest or fringe interest, but by the energy industry, by the oil industry. We saw the same thing with smoking and cigarettes, right? Science existed for a long time saying smoking was dangerous, and yet somehow we were not able to curtail that for a very long time. Pharma does similar things. There are deeply entrenched moneyed interests that now with social media can make it look like regular people are just discrediting you.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, Ali. And we talk about those five forces behind this anti-science movement today. Propagandists, pros, those are actually paid to spread the misinformation. Plutocrats like Elon Musk, who've taken over Twitter and weaponized it for the promotion of misinformation and disinformation, both on the side of climate and on the side of COVID-19 and vaccines. And so what we see is an interconnected network of forces that are working together to undermine public faith and understanding of science to further their own narrow interests. And unfortunately, we all lose out. And the planet is literally now at threat. And humanity is now literally at threat. We are at a pivotal moment. And if we don't listen to what the science has to tell us, we're in big trouble.
I'm a big fan of debate, and I think both of you would be remarkable to be in debates with people who don't share your views. But Peter, where do you draw the line there? Because some of it might be, some of these things about climate and vaccines might be worthy of debate. Lots of them are just not. They're long ago debunked. They're nonsensical and they're propaganda. So how do you think about that? Who should you engage with and whom shouldn't you engage with?
Well, you know, in Science Alley, we have processes that have been fine-tuned since the start of the Royal Society in London in the 1600s, and they work really well. You know, we have mechanisms to revise our papers through peer review, our scientific articles. Same with grant applications. We have our scientific meetings where we do debate and discuss between colleagues. But, you know, when you have a bad faith actor, like someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has no interest in the science, and is only interested in his confirmation bias, it becomes unproductive. And that's why I didn't want to debate him when there was this big pile-on with, if you remember, a couple of years back with Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And that's when I actually teamed up with Michael, because I remember saying, what the heck is going on here? And it was Michael who, you know, reached out to me, or I forget if I reached out to him, but, you know, he was really helpful. And he said, well, hey, I've been there, done that. And we were able to look at the experience of what's happened to the attacks on climate scientists to understand this better.
Michael, there's real criticism, valid criticism about the role media has played in these types of things in setting up a conversation. We're joining me now is Michael Mann, and someone who thinks Michael Mann is a fool. People who watch this show know full well we are a very pro-science show, and that I'm no expert on this stuff, so that's why we book people like you. Where are we with the media? Because the climate issue was one of those issues where the media went out of its way to give you both sides of an issue that we later learned didn't have both sides.
Yeah, you know, this is often called false objectivity. We call it performative neutrality, this idea that somehow in some sense of fairness to both sides in a political debate, we have to treat two different, you know, points of view as if they have equal weight. One of those points of view advanced by the leading experts in the field, by scientists, the other by, you know, random people on the internet, on social media, and some, you know, crackpots and propagandists who get almost equal time. This is a real problem, obviously, when it comes to dealing with these crises. And one of the things that we point out is that there's sort of a tripartite multi-crisis that we're facing right now: the climate crisis, the threat of ever more deadly pandemics, but the overriding crisis is the rise of misinformation and disinformation, the use of AI, to make it go essentially infinite, to create infinite disinformation. And unless we can get a handle on that and do something about that, we will be unable to tackle any of the great threats and challenges that we face.
And Peter, I've just got 60 seconds, but you mentioned it. I just want to underscore this. When you two gentlemen put out research, there is a system. It is peer reviewed. It's not just, we're not going to get better science just because two people debate each other. We actually have systems by which people with real training, not me, can evaluate your work.
That's correct. I can't think of an instance where science was actually advanced through public discussion or debate with people who have no scientific credentials. We had Einstein and Niels Bohr in the 1920s having public discussions at the Solvay Physics Conference, but that was very different. That was two valued colleagues trying to work it out and trying to understand things better, not this kind of performative nonsense that actually sets us back and actually gives a better voice to the crackpots.
Well, I've relied on both of you a lot for many years, and I'm grateful for it. Thank you to both of you. Thanks for writing this book, Dr. Peter Hotez and Professor Michael Mann. They are co-authors of Science Under Siege: How to Fight the 5 Most Powerful Forces That Threaten Our World.